Welcome everyone and welcome to this new F3 track guide series. Of course, I've done plenty of these track guides before, but this time around I'm specifically concentrating on the fixed setup. We have now, thankfully, hourly races, open and fixed series, and I thought I'd concentrate on the fixed setup because everyone has access to that setup because it's fixed. It's iRacing's standard setups which change week by week depending on the track you're on, and I understand not everyone has access to open setups or wants to pay for them, so it's also personal preference with those setups as well, and I thought this is for one and all because it's a level playing field, which is what everyone wants. Now, the one thing that we can change before we move forward with the fixed setup is the brake bias. It's the only aspect of the car that we can change. We can't play around with the fuel or the aero, and I always generally find that the brake bias is just a little bit too far forward with the fixed setups. So I always bring it back a touch, particularly here I'm using 54.4 for your reference. But what I'd suggest is for you guys to go out there, have a few laps, and if you're locking up the front wheels, just bring the brake bias back a touch. It's all personal preference. Some people prefer it, some people don't, but that's just my little tidbit and advice for you. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this season. I'm looking forward to doing these track guides for you. We are at Watkins Glen Classic Boot for the first race of the season, so we have no bus stop chicane. That long straight is pretty much flat out all the way from the first corner, so it's going to be interesting, a lot of drafting to say the least. And yeah, it's a track where I have noticed the temperatures fluctuate quite a bit throughout the week. This here, we did a 137.2 or just under a 137.3, and it was in a track temperature of 37 degrees. I have seen the track temps shoot up above 40 degrees, and I've seen them drop all the way down to low 20s, mid 20s. It's really strange here. So generally speaking, the lower the track temperature, the quicker your lap times are going to be, and the higher the track temperature, the slower it's going to be, because you're going to have more grip for the corners and also more drag as well. The hotter the track temperature is, you don't get as much top speed, I found. So yeah, it just take that into account when you're doing your lap times. Of course, this is a base for you and a reference for you to take from, and hopefully it will make you more consistent and improve those lap times for you. And yeah, hopefully we can have a good season ahead. Now, as always, for anyone who's new to this channel, my track guides, we look at the cockpit view first, and then we go to a far chase camera angle, and then finally an analysis of that lap, talking through the track, certain points and areas that we need to be wary of. And there's a couple of stuffiest tips that I've found here for you that actually make a big difference to your lap times. So yeah, be sure to stay around and check that analysis out as well. But yeah, lo and behold, let's head into it. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and enjoy. So there we go, guys. That was the lap. 1:37.29. So yeah, just under 37.3. I do think a 37 dead for me personally is possible here. I did go a little bit wide at some of the apexes, only a little bit, but they do obviously make up probably a couple of attempts around here. But I'll show you exactly where that was overall on this lap as we now analyze it and see how we did it. So yeah, let's do it. So we're at the start, finish straight, and we're just going to run this down into the first corner, which is the most important corner on this track, bar none, because the 95% of your overtakes are going to happen down this stretch. As we said, this is the Classic Boot version of the track or layout, so there is no bus stop chicane. So there is just one long straight. It's full throttle all the way from this first corner all the way down to that right hander, and it is just draft basically. So if you do not nail this corner and you don't get it right, you're going to be a sitting duck, and you also won't be able to make any overtakes either. So let's show you how we did it. So we're going to slow this down, and what we're going to keep an eye out for is just beyond the 200 marker here, we have the change in tarmac where it goes from a light grey to a dark grey. This line here is your braking marker. Now, of course, I've got quite warm tyres here, so the car is up to optimum performance, shall we say. So it may be that first couple of laps, when you've got colder tyres, full tank of fuel, you bring that braking marker just back a little bit, as with all the braking references that we're about to go through here. But this is our first one. And what we want to do, as you can see, we start to brake and we want to shift down into fourth gear. As you see kind of the bottom of the apex come into view, that's when you then want to turn in. And then it's important here that you get on the throttle before you get to the apex, which you're about to see. See that? So run it back just a little bit. I get on the throttle before I've hit the apex because you can really run it out wide here. Don't want to run it out too wide, but it's not a corner where we have to keep it necessarily inside the boundaries. It's Watkins Glen is like this, for anyone who hasn't raced it before, and we're very fortunate that we can get on the throttle this early. If we didn't have that runoff, we wouldn't be able to do this. But what you're also keeping an eye out for as well, guys, as you go through this apex, is not only getting on the throttle obviously early there, but this apex has two kind of layers to it. There's a little sausage curb here pretty much, but you can't quite see until you're on it. You want to keep your wheels as tight to this as possible, but of course don't hit it, because if you do, your car is going to be unsettled and then you're going to have to lift off the throttle and you won't get that nice optimum run down the back straight. As you can see here, keeping it nice and tight, we're on full throttle, and then we're allowing the car to run over this curb because we can. We don't want to run out too wide because of course we're then coming back onto the track at an acute angle, which means we lose that optimum top speed. Run it round the red and white curb. Be careful here of getting a wheel on this grass because it will be a 1X. I've done it plenty of times, so just be careful. And then we run it full throttle, keeping it tight to the apexes, covering as little track as possible, all the way down to the right-hander. Now, here's a stuffy tip for you guys. As we get here onto the back straight, you want to move your car over to the left-hand side of the track. You do not want to keep it in the middle of the track where you can see kind of this dark line, this dark zigzaggy line. Because what I've discovered is that you will lose about a tenth, about a tenth really, sometimes even more, depending on how much fuel you've got in the car, because the car bottoms out. The floor hits the ground and it slows up the car. So just be careful that when you're defending, you want to be either over to the right hand side or over to the left hand side, whether you're overtaking or defending, because if you're in the middle, you're going to lose a lot of time. They're more than likely going to sweep straight past you. So just be careful there. Something that I discovered, because I was wondering why my lap times were kind of dropping, or my speed was dropping through there, and I realised, and you can even hear it, you can hear the bottom of the car hitting the ground. So yeah, a little stuffy tip for you there. So we keep it over to the left hand side where the track's nice and flat. Full throttle all the way down past the bus stop chicane. Then we come to the right hander. Now we're going to slow it down here, because what we're keeping an eye out for again is there are no braking markers, there are no 100 ball markers, 50 ball markers. We have to have a reference point in the track, and our reference point is, as we get just a little bit closer, once again like the first corner where the track goes from light to dark. This here is your braking marker, and all you're doing is really kind of dabbing the brakes. It's not a full brake, because this is quite a high downforce setup. I've discovered the fixed setup this week, so we can carry a lot of speed through here, but we're going to have a little dab of the brakes, and then we're going to shift down into 5th gear, because that gets the car turning in and allows us to accelerate out. If you keep it in 6th gear, you just understeer quite a lot, and the car bogs down a little bit. So you can see here we've dabbed the brakes, shifted down into 5th. Allow that shifting down into 5th kind of pulls the car up a little bit as well, a bit of engine braking, so you don't have to hold the brakes as long as you think you do. And then turning in, and we're keeping it tight to this curb as we can. You can ride it as well, but you'll see here. And as we get really to this concrete patch here, it's this little access road. That's where, obviously, you can see I'm not on full throttle. That's where you then want to get onto full throttle. You're far enough around the corner that you're not going to understeer and run out of track. And then open the steering and allow the car to move out to the left. Now, be careful, guys. If you do run out a little bit wide here, if you're on the outside of someone, you run out a bit of track, this little rumble strip here really does. In this instance, we don't do it because we've hit the perfect racing line, but this track here, the car does stick to it. It's almost like a train track. Once it gets on it, it doesn't want to go, and you can't get it off, and you end up running out of track, and you can get onto the grass, and it's very, very dangerous. You could come back onto track and spin the car because it's very unsettled, so just be careful there. And then we're very quickly heading down into the left hander. We're into the boot now, and once again, no board markers to take for a reference point. We are keeping an eye on the track changing shade again from a light to dark grey, and I keep this in 5th. You'll be very nearly to the top of the rev limiter. It's kind of if you were to brake any later, you would hit the rev limiter. So if you're in someone's draft, it may be that you have to shift up into 6th gear, but you want to take this shift down into 4th gear. So as you can see, braking kind of just before we get to it, but I'm thinking in my mind that I've braked on it. That is my braking marker. We're all the way over to the right hand side to open up the corner, and then we shift down into 4th, and then a little bit of trail braking is required here, because even so, the amount of speed that you're carrying through this corner, the car it's very easy to get on the power very early and just completely run out of track. And unlike the first corner, we don't have any runoff area here. There's just a wall. It's one of the places, popular places for people to crash. They hit the wall, bounce off, and then people just, oncoming traffic just hit straight into them. So just be careful around here. But you can see we get on the throttle as we're around about halfway around the corner. Reference point wise, it's very difficult to pick out a reference point of when to get on the throttle. It's more about feel than anything. You need to just go around this track a few times to figure out when you can properly get on the throttle. If I was to say, to be honest, if you were going to pick out a reference point, you could say when the barriers here finish. But to be perfectly honest, when you're racing, when you're going around this corner at full speed as we are, you're not looking at that as a reference point. You're looking into the apex. So it's more of a feel corner of knowing when to get onto the throttle. So just plenty of practice, guys. And you'll know soon enough if you've got on the throttle too early, because as we come around this corner, keeping it tight to the apex, you'll run out of track and you'll hit this wall. So just be careful. We did that perfectly there because we got the wheels on the rumble strip, on the curb, and then we come down here. Now, this is also a corner, the hairpin, that you'll see a lot of people crash at and spin, and I'll show you exactly why. So what we're keeping an eye out for is the 100 bulb marker. We're going to be braking there. That is your reference point. You can see on the inputs down below. And what we're using here as a turning reference is, you can see here there's like a patchwork of concrete in essence in the track, and where the new meets the old, or the new meets the old, vice versa, you can see this line. That's pretty much where you want to get your car, the nose of your car, onto. And then as we go round, you want to be in the middle here, following it round, and you can see that is your line. And then as it really starts to narrow in here, as you can see, the car is at the end here of this barrier. That's when you then want to get on the throttle. You want to keep it as tight as you can here without hitting this curb, because it will unsettle the car. This is also, I was a little bit further away from this curb. It doesn't look like it, but I was a little bit further away from this curb than I should have been, and I did lose a bit of time. And then you're full on the throttle, making sure you open that steering as you go through, because if you keep that steering locked as you're on full throttle, as you're coming out of the corner, you will just lose the rear and it will spin on. Now, another thing that we need to be careful of on the exit of this corner and getting on the throttle too early out of the corner is that you will just understeer and you will run out of room. And there is no room for error here. There is a slight little runoff that you can see here. Slight little runoff. It's very fine margins. And if you'll see all too often, if you drop a wheel only slightly on this grass, you lose it. You spin the car. It's like ice. It's just, I'm not sure how fair and realistic that is. I've never raced in Watkins Glen in my life. I don't know how a real life race car handles being on grass, so I can't comment in that regards too much, but it seems very, very icy than anything. So be careful getting wheels onto this car, because if you get your rear on this grass, you're in the wall and your race is over and done with. And more than likely, if there's people behind you, you're going to collect the guys behind you as well. So just be very, very careful there. We're now coming down the back straight, which is another overtaking opportunity here. So yeah, if you can stay close to someone out of the hairpin, it's a good opportunity here. And what we're keeping an eye out for is, just as you go past 200 marker there, we've got the 100 marker in front of us. We're braking about the 150. We're braking in between these two markers. So it kind of comes down to feel again. And we're shifting down into third gear. As you can see, we're turning in just as we get to the end of the white strip on the left. In third gear, keeping it as tight to the apex as we can. It's very easy to get too close to this, as the corner before. These are very highly raised. If you touch them, it will unsettle the car and you will be a sitting duck to the guys behind, lose lots of speed, and worst case, spin the car. But you can see here how early, once again, I get, as we kind of hit in I'd say the outermost point of the apex is when we're then getting right on the throttle. Trust the grip. Obviously, I've got a lot of temperature in these tyres, so I'm able to get on the throttle as early as I can. Full tank of fuel, cold tyres, you'll have to delay that throttle input a touch. Trust the grip, third gear, it's not a second gear corner, it's you just hit the rev limiter and you lose too much speed, it's too much engine braking. Open up the steering. Once again, be careful. You can see a couple of little tracks here where I've gone off on the grass. Be very careful, it's very easy to spin it like the last corner if you touch the grass. And then very quickly we're over to the right hand side. Now this is probably the most difficult corner, or is the most difficult corner on the track. You'll see more people spin here than anywhere else, and it's once again very difficult. There is no braking reference. There's very little in the track. There's very little to the sides. It's kind of all to do with feel again. But where I start to brake is when pretty much, because you're looking into the apex, you're not looking straight ahead of you. You should be looking into the apex. If you aren't, do. And as the apex just kind of comes into view, as I can start to see kind of the top of the apex, that's when I then start to brake. And I shift down into third, and a bit of trail braking is required here. As you can see, just a little bit, because if you get on the throttle too early, the car just spins on you. And the thing is as well, is it's off camber. So it's just so easy, it's such a treacherous corner. You can see here, I'm a little bit on the throttle. And then as I'm round the corner, I'm getting back on the throttle. But I'm not full throttle at this point. It's not like other corners where I can get on the throttle early and power out of the exit. I can't do that until really you're round the corner. And then it flattens out. That's when you know that you can get fully down on the throttle. And then use that little runoff, come through. That's a corner that just demands so much practice because, as I said, it's difficult. There's not much of a reference point in regards to braking and throttle control as well around there. Don't want to get on the throttle too early. And then we come round to the last couple of corners, which are nice and easy, really. So this corner is just a nice flat round here. You're turning in at the 100 bulb marker, keeping it as tight to the apex as you can. Open up the steering. Shouldn't really come anywhere near to the white curb, white runoff there. Of course, if someone's on your inside, be careful because that runs out very quickly. And if you get on the grass, it's very difficult to stop it and come back on track. And then we come to the last corner, which is essential, very, very essential, like the first corner, to you qualifying and putting in that good lap, because this sets up this. The main straight is quite reasonable, so there's a lot of time that can be lost here, quite a few temps. So what we're keeping an eye out for, as you can see, unfortunately the antenna's right in the middle of the track here, but what we're keeping an eye out for is where the track, this little runoff here that opens up the corner, starts. So as it widens up, you can see that's where I'm starting to brake. That's my visualization of when that starts to open up. And then you're staying in fifth gear here, and all it is just a little dab of the brakes. And then we're turning in, and you can see, very similar to the hairpin from further back at the start of the boot, you can see this section of like replaced tarmac. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to follow that line, keeping the wheels as tight to the apex as possible without touching this curb, because if you do, as I've said before, it unsettles the car, you lose top speed. And then full throttle before we get to the apex. Allow the car to drift out onto the curb, back on and across the line to start your next lap. And there we go, guys, that is a lap around Watkins Glen Classic Boots, and hopefully that lap from the cockpit view, the far chase camera angle and that analysis will improve your lap times and make you much more consistent this week in the fixed setup. It's quite a good setup here this week. Fixed setups can be very hit and miss. Some of them are horrendous, some of them are really good. While this While this setup I expect to be slower than the Open series this week, mainly because with such a long back straight, people are going to be running very low downforce. There's a few tricks in the setups as well that I'm not too privy to, where you can still maintain the downforce through the corners and not lose any top speed. So I fully expect Open setup series to be quicker here this week than the fixed setup. But yeah, it feels a good one. Feels good for the corners, plenty of downforce, and yeah, should make for some good racing. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know how you're getting on in the comments below. And yeah, the first of many this season. Enjoy. Bye.